Hey there, kids! Let me tell you about a place called the Mangosteen Islands. It's a magical spot where the sun always shines. The beaches are covered in soft white sand. The water is so clear you can see right to the bottom, and the air? It smells like sweet, juicy mangosteen fruit all day long. On these islands lived a young boy named Elleanard. He was a fun-loving kid with a big smile. Elleanard loved to play on the beach. He would build sandcastles taller than himself. He'd chase the colourful fish in the shallow waters, and he'd climb the twisty trees to pick fresh mangosteens. Elleanard's days were filled with adventure. He'd explore hidden caves with his friends. They'd have picnics under the shade of giant leaves. Sometimes they'd even spot dolphins jumping in the waves. It was like living in a perfect paradise. But even in paradise there are rules to follow, and that's where our story really begins. You see, Elleanard was about to learn a very important lesson. A lesson about listening to good advice and taking care of yourself. So let's dive in and see what happens to our young friend on the Mangosteen Islands. Now, Elleanard had two loving parents. They were always looking out for him. One day they sat him down for a serious talk. Elleanard, his mum said, "We need you to start wearing goggles when you swim." His dad nodded in agreement. "The salt water can hurt your eyes if you're not careful," he added. Elleanard listened, but he didn't really understand. He'd been swimming without goggles his whole life. Why start now? His parents explained that as he was getting older, he was spending more time in the water. They showed him a pair of cool blue goggles. "These will protect your eyes," his mom said with a smile. His dad then told him a story. It was about a friend who didn't protect his eyes. That friend got a painful eye infection. He couldn't swim or play for weeks. Elleanard's eyes went wide. He didn't want that to happen to him. His parents hugged him and said they just wanted him to be safe. Elleanard promised to wear the goggles. He even tried them on right there. They felt a bit weird, but not too bad. His parents looked relieved. They thought their son had understood the importance of their advice. But as we'll soon see, Elleanard had other ideas. Sometimes, kids, it's not enough to just hear good advice. You need to follow it too. The next day, Elleanard went to the beach with his friends. He had the goggles in his pocket, but when it was time to swim, he hesitated. His friends were already in the water, laughing and splashing. They weren't wearing any goggles. Elleanard didn't want to look different. He didn't want them to make fun of him. So he made a decision. He left the goggles in his bag. "It'll be fine," he thought. "I've never needed them before." He ran into the waves, joining his friends. They swam and played for hours. Elleanard's eyes stung a bit, but he ignored it. He was having too much fun to worry. This went on for days. Every time Elleanard went swimming, he left the goggles behind. Sometimes he'd feel a little guilty. He knew he was breaking his promise to his parents, but then he'd look at his friends all goggle-free and push the feeling away. He told himself he was old enough to make his own decisions. Elleanard's stubborn streak was getting stronger. He started to think he knew better than his parents. "They're just being overprotective," he'd tell himself. But oh, how wrong he was. You see, kids, our parents and elders often have wisdom we don't yet understand. And Elleanard was about to learn this lesson the hard way. Sometimes being stubborn can lead to some pretty tough consequences. Section 4. The Price of Pride. One morning, Elleanard woke up and something felt wrong. His eyes were itchy and sore. When he looked in the mirror, he gasped. His eyes were red and puffy. They hurt so much he could barely keep them open. Tears kept streaming down his face. He'd never felt pain like this before. His parents rushed him to the doctor. The doctor looked at Elleanard's eyes and shook his head. "Doctor, you have a severe eye infection," he said. "Have you been swimming without protection?" Elleanard hung his head in shame. He couldn't lie. He told the doctor and his parents the truth. He hadn't been wearing his goggles. The doctor explained that the infection was serious. Elleanard would need to take medicine and eye drops for weeks. Worse, he couldn't go swimming or play outside. He had to stay in a dark room to let his eyes heal. Elleanard felt terrible, not just because of the pain, but because he knew this was all his fault. His parents were disappointed, but they didn't yell. They just looked sad. That made Elleanard feel even worse. He realized how much he had hurt them by breaking his promise. As he lay in his dark room, unable to play or see his friends, Elleanard had a lot of time to think. He thought about his choices, his stubbornness, and the price he was now paying for his pride. It was a tough lesson, but an important one. Section 5. A lesson learned the hard way. For weeks, Elleanard stayed in his dark room. His eyes slowly got better. His mum would read him stories. His dad would sit with him and talk. Elleanard started to realize how much his parents cared. They weren't trying to spoil his fun. They were trying to keep him safe. As he got better, Elleanard thought about his actions. He remembered how he ignored his parents' advice. He thought about how he cared more about looking cool than being safe. And he realized how silly that was. Real friends wouldn't make fun of him for wearing goggles. Real friends would want him to be safe too. Finally, after what felt like forever, Elleanard was allowed outside again. The doctor said his eyes were healed, but Elleanard had changed. He wasn't the same stubborn boy anymore. He had learned a valuable lesson about humility and listening to good advice. The first thing Elleanard did was apologize to his parents. He told them he was sorry for not listening. He promised to always wear his goggles when swimming, and this time he meant it. His parents hugged him tight. They were just happy he was okay, and that he had learned from his mistakes. Sometimes, kids, we have to learn things the hard way, but that's okay, as long as we do learn and grow from our experiences. Section 6, the value of humility and good advice. So what can we learn from Elleanard's story? Well, first of all, it's important to listen to good advice. Our parents, teachers and other adults in our lives often know things we don't. They've had more experiences and learned more lessons. When they give us advice, it's usually to help us, not to spoil our fun. Being humble is also really important. Humility means knowing that we don't know everything. It means being open to learning from others. Elleanard thought he knew better than his parents, but in the end, he realized they were right all along. If he had been more humble, he could have avoided a lot of pain and trouble. Another lesson is about taking care of ourselves. Our health is precious. We should always do what we can to stay safe and healthy. Sometimes that might mean doing things we don't want to do, like wearing goggles or eating vegetables, but in the long run, it's always worth it. Finally, remember that it's okay to make mistakes. What's important is that we learn from them. Elleanard made a big mistake, but he learned a valuable lesson. He became a better person because of it. So if you make a mistake, don't be too hard on yourself. Just think about what you can learn and how you can do better next time. And always remember, it's cool to be safe and to listen to good advice.